So just as a little background, I'm Thomas Marlowe, registered patent attorney. Previously, I headed up the IP department at Fairchild Semiconductor. Been involved in the development of patent analytics tools and techniques over the last dozen years or so now. Currently, I run operations and technology at Black Hills IP and serve as the president of Black Hills IP Renewals, where we leverage analytics to drive annuity decisions. So today's webinar, which is going to be the first in our series, we're going to be focusing on an intro into 8 types of IP analytics. I've roped SLW's resident analytics guru, Mark Stignani, into today's discussion to walk us through the subject. And Mark, why don't you give us a little bit of your background?
All right, well, thank you, Tom, and thanks everybody for joining us here. My background is a little bit of everything. I was in IP counsel for Thomson Reuters, in which I handled IP protection, capture, harvesting for a number of the various divisions, legal, scientific, IP, medical at the time, and then financial services as well. During that time, I had the opportunity to sit with a lot of great minds on the subject of analytics. Got to be there with a lot of people doing testbed analytics and trying to discover new and better ways to find inferences, both quantitative and qualitatively, with, in this case, patent analytics. So I've been very fortunate to learn at the seat of many, many masters the theories and thoughts that I've come here. So I bring, hopefully, to this discussion not just patent analytics, but patent analytics infused with business as well as financial background sense.
Great. Well, we're glad to have you here, and let's
get started. Huh?
Yeah, let's jump in.
All right. Well, let's see here. Let me just start by opening what this is and what this isn't. So this is going to be a very high-level presentation today. We're going to talk just some definitions and some who, what, why, and where with about various aspects of patent analytics. I'm going to say if you're a very skilled IP analytics, of which if I look at the list of people here, there's a number of you here. Today's webinar may be too basic, but the next ones I guarantee are going to be deeply intricate and very thought-provoking as we go through them. So if this is too basic for you, hang on. It's going to get more fun on the next ones. So let's just jump right in. We'll talk about patent watching. Patent watching it falls into 2 definitional categories. I'm going to go through this with the same kind of format with all these different categories, definitions, and then why, what, how, and when. So why do we watch patents? Individual patents have a life cycle. We see them from birth and the application status through their eventual death or abandonment. And during that time, especially during prosecution, lots of different things can happen. So why do we watch individual patents? We look at individual patents for what they might be at the earliest stages, what they're turning into during the patent prosecution stages, and what is their outcome or value, let's say, issue into a grant, and are looked upon either in the citation world as prior art, or as in the assertion and licensing world as a item for as an item that's an asset for sale, assertion, or some other activity in the business world. Why do we do it? Also, let me define portfolios. Portfolios is just a clustering of other patents that we find some tangible relationship with, that we watch things change and do. For instance, if we look at patents that would normally fall in the Alice categories, we can certainly watch groupings of those patents and monitor them and to see which ones are going through successfully, which ones are not going through successfully. So patent watching at the portfolio level is you're looking for general organizational trends or judicial trends as they're being watched. Now, why do we do this in general? There's a ton of reasons. Biggest one is competitive intelligence. What is our competitor doing? What is another market player doing? How well does this market player fit in with our view of the world's intellectual property? We can use it for market defense. If a particular non-practicing entity has a group of portfolio patents that's purchased from some other company, we can start to look at that and try to make some watches as to what they're doing in prosecution to, make some reactions to it for market defense. What do we look for? We look for changes in claims. We look for changes in attorneys. We look for changes in ownership. We look for changes in general that have lots and lots of different logical business inferences that you can take from it. How do we do it? Tom mentioned that we have a dashboard tool that we use here at the firm, as well as I think Black Hills as well uses it quite sufficiently. I use a lot of other commercial systems too as well, so that I want to say there's many, many ways to look at this type of data, and there's many other tools to use this data in. When do we do it? Freedom to operate, design around risk avoidance, product review, anything that we want to see where a patent would have a tangible impact when something substantial has been made happening to it during the patent prosecution process.
So Mark,
Right.
do you think,
Yeah.
could you give maybe a quick example if you're doing, say, freedom to operate, around a product being designed, of something that you would watch for and how you would use that data once it would come up in a watch?
Certainly. Well, what I would do, is, and if we'll cover freedom to operate on another slide in a few minutes here, but in generally what we're looking to do is to understand what the landscape of patent owners is in a certain place. So if I was, in this case, I'm using Medtronic as an example. So if I was Medtronic and I wanted to understand what cardiac pacemakers was doing in ownership of their patents, we could certainly look at what the owners are doing in a patent watch of the patents that were identified in the Freedom to Operate search, especially if they're applications. If you identify applications which are not technically grants, which are not technically legal rights at that point, but they have the propensity to turn a clear field of patent analysis into a very muddy field of patent analysis should there get a sudden allowance or an allowance of something quite broad. So we can watch those patents at the number level. If we have docket data, we can watch them at the docketing level. It's with an internal tool. We can look at them from an ownership standpoint, maybe an owner changes over time. We can look at who the inventors are, look at the technology. We can look at the pair data and look at all that stuff as it changes and modifies through in the case of an FTO. So it's basically patents generally are not very static items during the application process. So we try to find ways to monitor those and adapt to their outcome once the outcome is known. So let's jump on to the next version here. I'm going to try to keep this crisp and fast here. So we'll talk about patent counts. We do patent counts. It's probably one of the most basic formats of patent analysis is how many do they have, and in a number of different formats. So patent counts by owner is simply self-explanatory. How many patents does a patent owner own, and how many did they get organically, and how many did they get by acquisition? Another definition by classification code, how many of them are in a particular category of technology, so forth and so on, how they have less of, what do they have more of. Why do we keep count? A lot of what we keep count for is we use this a lot in budget assistance for our clients, or our clients use this for budgeting as well, because one of the best and easiest metrics to help get your budget approved for next year is that your competing company actually filed this many patents last year, or this many patents the year before. Therefore, that equates to an approximate budget of this much. Our budget is this much, and here's the delta. So a lot of times patent counts are used in budgeting. What do we look for? We like to look for year-on-year change. We like to look at how many grants, how many applications, how many things have been abandoned, how many things have expired. And then we look at original and current assignees to make sure that we understand how much have they bought, how many have they purchased, are they in an acquisition mode or in disposal mode. For those who remember, Yahoo did a lot of application disposal and grant disposal before they shoved everything else they had into an IP company called Excalibur. That's one thing we found very interesting in the patent counts world. How we do it, we do lots of clustering. We take semantic algorithms, we take statistical algorithms, we take classification schemes, taxonomy, so forth and so on, and we try to break logical groups of patents down into understandable chunks. We create portfolios in them, and we make charts. And I say bar and chart because being a fairly simple person, I find that if I have something more complex than a bar chart to explain, I have a hard time explaining it to most of my clients. I have a direct bias against landscapes of those islands and ocean things, but we can get into that. It's another subject for another time. When do we do it? It's the most common thing. We do it all the time. We do it for baseline. We do it for benchmarking current clients against other companies, and we also use it as a fundamental investment question. How much does this particular company invest in patenting? Because it's fairly easy to calculate budgets based upon patent counts. How do we see things like that? I think there's, picking on Medtronic here. So here's just a simple way of looking at counts. Here's a Medtronic proper, Covidien before the merger, Abbott Cardiovascular, St. Jude. Again, also pre-merger, we look at counts over time, year-on-year filings, bar chart, so forth and so on. Jumping on to geographic patent searching. Geographic patent searching is another fairly baseline, fairly common thing that we do. Geographic patent searching by owner is what countries is your patent owner filing, how many are they filing, how far do the families go, classification, which technologies are being filed internationally. Why do we keep count? Because a lot of times you can estimate geographic reach in your client question of the other patent owner. So if you have a patent owner you're reviewing that only files in certain countries, you can make assumptions about their level of product sales in those marketplaces. You can make assumptions about why they would be in those marketplaces. If you look at the owner that is filing in those marketplaces, you can make some decision about which entity of the company is doing the patent filing, and are there reasons other than simple legal action? Are there tax actions? Are there other things that would be inferred from those geographic patent counts?
Yeah, again, interesting kind of host of business data that you can glean from that, which is
absolutely
like you mentioned, from taxes to favorable sales jurisdictions, competitive jurisdictions. It's a good point.
Exactly. Yeah. So the thing is that the geographic patent data is actually much more useful than people tend to use it for, just because it costs so darn much to get your patents done, across a large geographic area, that it's a much harder and more strategic decision for them to do it, as a company. So we can infer a lot more from a geographic distribution than a lot of people would imagine. So what do we look for? Same stuff as patent counts. How do we do it? Same stuff as patent counts as well. And when do we do it? Well, we do it again back at budgeting, back when we're looking at market entry or market estimation. How much do we think a certain company does in the marketplace based upon the number of patent filings around a product? So if we're able to isolate a patent count in the U.S. that approximates a product's revenue, we can make a proportional estimate of how much revenue there might be in the other marketplace, roughly. Windage and elevation of what they may be spending in that other marketplace. So that here's another view of how we might think about that. This is again Medtronic as a combined whole, and we've got distribution by country, relatively unrecent data in the thing here. So it's just a tool that we can look at and make some decisions about. Citation analysis. Well, hang on to your hats here, people, because this one is controversial. It's completely convoluted, and there's a lot of nuance to this. So citation is probably the most touted or bragged about analysis that you'll see in patent analytics, and I personally find it a good place to start, but that's about it. So let's go from back some definitions. A backward citation, when I refer to it, is a citation that a application or a patent has been reviewed against to make sure that it is substantially distinguishable from the prior art. So if you want to think about backward citation is prior art. Forward citation is when a matter has granted or is published that is used then as prior art for another piece of art, forward in time to distinguish that piece of art. So if you think about a matter as a point in time, anything backward cited was used for it to get granted. Forward citation is everything else that has used that matter to get, as prior art to get granted forward. A definition of a co-citation: between two matters, you may share certain prior art. So a co-citation would be a piece of prior art that is shared between 2 points of 2 different matters that have the same citation background. Fourth definition, examiner citation. This is an examiner provided citation during patent prosecution where the examiner, he or she comes up with a new piece of cited art as a reason to not grant or to oppose the granting of a certain piece of patent prosecution. We view examiner citations as more important simply because through the IDS process, it is possible to manipulate and also create citations for backward citations for various matters. So we tend to exclude a lot of IDS citations as being highly relevant at all in this. So as I mentioned, citation is the only starting point. I think as a patent grant gets older and older and there's more citation around it, there is some value to looking at what it is viewed as, but the citation only views as the total disclosure, not the claims themselves. So we never look at citations as being indicative of a good or bad claim set. So lots and lots of limitations. What do we look for? We look for backward citations of being, a fair amount of high percentage of examiner citation. Forward citations, we look for those also to be examiner citations as being relevant. What forward citations can indicate is that there may be people in or around your area of practice that might be worth a second look to see if they're still working in your area of technology and whether they might be stepping into some of your claims. We look at examiner citations as well as because we find those to be much more realistic citations in light of the subject matter being patented. We look at recent citations. If your matter is getting a forward citation, it happens recently, there's a vibrancy factor there, so that your technology is still relatively useful and vibrant in the current marketplace. As I mentioned earlier, most citations, the patents in your portfolio that have the most citations do have and are worth a second or third look as to their value and as to their claim structure. How do we do it? Same stuff as before. Not going to spend a lot of time on that. When do we do it? First time I look at a portfolio, I will pull the whole portfolio together and look at the citation structure and see kind of what's in line, what's going forward. We can also look, as in the U.S. matters, look forward citation, and as to what type of rejection they were used in, 101, 102, 103 rejections. So interesting stuff coming forward there. More to come on that. We use these to look for new patents and new movement by new entrants into the marketplace. So if you have a patent from an entirely unknown person or unknown company entering the citation marketplace in a recent citation, you want to make sure you look at that company for movement in the business sense into that space. Same thing goes with an acquisition of that as well. So how does that look like? Well, just pulled, it's really, really complex. I just pulled a very quick look here. Backward citation of Medtronic. We can see Medtronic both in forward and backward citation, highly cite itself. But when you're looking at a large group of, a large portfolio and people who cite back and forth in that area, it tends to be a very, very true indicator of who's actually in competition in that marketplace. So the law of large numbers does help give you more of an indication when you're moving through citation. So let's move into patent family, patent file histories. The patent family are a construct of multiple country filings or multiple filings in a single country of a matter that shares, and I'm going to use this definition, shares the same priority date, the same date of filing. There are about 6 different versions and definitions of patent family out there. We'll probably cover those in excruciating detail in the series going forward, but suffice it to say here, it is basically a relationship of priority date, possible family members, including same inventors, possible other factors, including company ownership. So there's a lot of different ways to think of a patent family. But for the moment here, we'll just say it is a clustering of patent filings around a single idea, and how it's defined will be gone forward. File history is the blow-by-blow interaction between the patent applicant and the patent office of choice, and in predominantly a U.S.-only thing here, because the file histories in the U.S. are readily available online, and you can see that and you can utilize those things. So basically, that is a traveling document of all the interactions with the patent office in getting your patent issued. Continuation application is largely an American construct. It is the ability to clone a patent application with different claims that may have entirely different claim content in the previous matter being cloned. So there is also another format of continuation application called a continuation in part, which tends to be the little red-headed stepchild of the continuation application, in which we would add new subject matter from your specification, from another specification, and combine those together into a new patent application. A more universal concept, divisional application, which is recognized both in the U.S. and other jurisdictions, is to separate your initial invention disclosure, invention filing, application filing into a number of subordinate patents which claim different inventions within that same specification. And that tends to be done in a species format versus a different genus format, as continuations can be. Why does it matter? These help tell you how far the invention is reaching. How far does the invention reach geographically? How far does it reach as far as claim protection, claim scope? File histories also tell you what limitations were imposed during prosecution. The continuations also help take you towards expansion and also changes in company strategy, because many times you'll see a company file patent applications in a ready, fire, aim format, where they actually file continuations to cover changes in strategy, changes in activities as they're going through the prosecution of their original family. You can also tell how many multiple inventions are in larger formats. So if there's a large number of divisionals, you can look back at that and pretty reliably guess that patent application was intended to be an omnibus application. So another one worth reading more completely. What do we look for? We look for the countries that are filed in, the consistency of the applications. Are the claims very close to each other? Are the claims cover entirely different genuses based upon the applications? Did the examiner put a lot of limitations in one family member and not the other ones? Were there mistakes made in prosecution there? So we look for lots and lots of data in both these two areas. How we do? We chart out the family, and we do it in many ways the same process there. As mentioned earlier, When do we do it? We do it in valuation studies, we do it for annuity budgeting, we do it for assertion, we do it for licensing, we do it for tax planning. This is a very interesting area and topic that I expect to fill out a lot of time on going forward. How we look at this, just a simple view of family membership, having U.S. Of a U.S. member that has a family membership in Canada, the EP, and Japan, and we look at the types of applications and the global reach of that is just in the tool we use here.
Yeah, and that can be interesting analytics too. Like I've seen in like a licensing setting where a company is trying to license their patents across multiple jurisdictions, and you get into what you were talking about with comparing the claim coverage and where the claims might be different from country A to country B. And you see in country A them having to make an amendment based on some prior art that came up, and then that prior art not coming up in country B, and so the claims are left broad. And if you're on the other side of that table in a licensing discussion, that gives you leverage, right? And
yeah,
that's a scenario I've been in, and it pays off.
Yeah, and depending on what side you're on, it's uncomfortable or really fun. So,
right.
Because a lot of people don't cover that in a license discussion. I found that many of the licensing discussions I've been in have been light on analytics, and when you call somebody on that nonsense, then that's when the fun of the licensing begins. Ownership analytics, another fun area. We did a quick definition. Inventor, and in the U.S. it's the person who invents. In other countries, it's the person who the company decides as the inventor, as the applicant. Definition of assignee is who is assigned the invention. That doesn't always happen, but it's generally in the corporate ownership situation, the corporation is generally the assignee. Original assignee, I've mentioned this a couple times earlier. A lot of times in patent analytics, patents are bought and sold. And so what we like to do is look at the original assignee to find out where the organic invention occurred. And many times it occurs elsewhere than the current assignee, who is the owner of the patent at that point. Assignment chain. Assignment chain is a very useful tool for seeing where the patent traveled through in ownership as it went through changes ownership, licensing, financing, so forth and so on. So the assignment chain has the chain of title been adequately documented in the documentation as well. So why does it matter? Do you actually own something is probably the most important thing. Did you make mistakes during it, or is your ownership impaired in some way? Did your continuation get filed in the name of the right owner, or if you did a transfer of ownership during the time that the patents were in prosecution, did you actually follow up and reset your ownership chain of title? So what do we look for? Mistakes, especially chain of title mistakes. Chain of title mistakes, especially in an acquisition or disposal, can change the entire valuation of your sale. Errors in assignment, a lot of them can be fixed, a lot of them, but a lot of them aren't. So,
and if you have to fix them, it can be arduous, especially if you're talking, tracking down inventors on patents that were filed years ago. It can be a pain.
It's a huge pain, and you go through an awful lot of you can create an awful lot of noise if that matter ever gets into litigation, if you don't have that done right. How do we do it? We review the assignee for errors. We compare against companies of record. We review the legal status. I'll show you that in a second. When do we do it? M&A. M&A is probably a lot of the 90th percentile elephant in the room there. Evaluation, assertion, licensing, tax planning, but a lot of times as you're buying and selling assets in stock or asset sales, you really need to look at the IP, assignments and make sure that they're done. And as well as if you go back into this, one of the biggest problems I've always found in M&A work is that it isn't the patent assignments, it is the actual employment agreements that don't assign IP rights to the company to do such a thing. So another area to double down on the next point in the series. Another look here, a couple slides. Medtronic has lots of different names. In this case, we can see various non-Medtronic assignees are in here. Some of them are separate operating units, some are tax units, some are just separate and segregated for at least no good reason without deeper analytics to figure out why. Chain of title. Here's a really quick, straightforward way of seeing the chain of title moving forward. Of particular note, if you look at the June 28, 1999 idea there, entry there, you can see that Medtronic used this particular matter as collateral as a security answer. So another thing about ownership data, it's always very interesting to make sure that you cleared all liens on and security interests on your matters if you're doing a due diligence on a patent portfolio.
Well, and when you're rolling up your analytics, that you aren't inadvertently including banks that have purely recorded security interests as potential owners of the patent, which I've seen happen using some other types of tools.
Some of the other commercial systems don't sort that out for you, so you find that the U.S. Bank or Chase Manhattan especially owns a great
Silicon Valley Bank.
Yeah, according to other people's systems.
Mm-hmm.
So prosecution analytics, this is a really interesting and I think burgeoning area that not a lot of people, not a lot of companies do. So let me spend a little more time on this. I already know we're going way over our time right now, so I'll continue to hurry. PAIR is the legal status system of the USPTO, where they publish all the information and legal status around an application that is public. RCE, request for continuing examination, is a second bite of the apple, if you will, in review of a patent application. And generally, you get 2 office actions, which goes into the next definition as you're examining a patent with a patent examiner. If you don't get an allowance in the first 2 office actions, you can now file a request for examination. It is an extensive additional process in the patent prosecution chronology. So we like to chart those out in prosecution analytics. We like to chart out the number of office actions. Why does it matter? We like to show prosecution efficiency. We like to look at art unit issues. We like to see other law firm issues. We like to show our clients where stuck and stale applications exist, where there are low value applications. We basically extract events, these different events from PAIR with a couple different means, and we chart them. When do we do it? Well, as always, budget, prosecution, evaluation, so forth, and pretty much everything else. This is a base analytical thing that only now is just getting to the point where people can utilize it. We combine this with file histories and different mapping technologies to help us make better choices in prosecution for our clientele. Here's a basic statistical page of PAIR data of Medtronic. This is all public records. As we can see that Medtronic here is doing much better these days they've only got 39 matters with 6 office actions or more. They've only got 11 actions with 3 RCEs or more. We're very able to very quickly drill down and save clients money and time by highlighting matters that are stuck in prosecution that they maybe don't want to keep, maybe they don't want to push further on, maybe their money is better spent elsewhere. So we find this is a very important aspect of our analytics work for our clientele. Part white space and white space analytics. This is the last slide. Basically, this is an area of the greatest confusion in patent analytics out there, and this actually may be a two event series, a 2-hour series, because there's so much here. So landscape is just a general statistical display of who owns what patents of a various classification in a various area. Validity and invalidity is a study done by patent firms as to whether or not a patent is granted and has aspects or attributes of validity, or whether or not the prior art would render it invalid. Non-infringement studies are does the item that you are worried about infringe the prior art out there or infringe any patents out there? So there's a study of whether you infringe or do not infringe, entirely different thing. White space analysis. If anyone tells you they can do white space analysis inexpensively, they're lying. White space analysis is the discovery of things that are not patented, and it is like defining a negative space. It is a very difficult thing to do. There are lots of different ways to do it. I have found very few that I would actually term as good white space analysis. White space is supposedly areas that you, in a thicket of patents, that you could theoretically put a product through without infringement, or also put your own patents in place to claim that white space. Definitions, claim analysis versus disclosure analysis. When people analyze a lot of patents, many times they're analyzing the disclosure in that patent versus the claims coverage in that disclosure. Two very different things. Well, if you don't do both, you haven't analyzed your patents correctly. FTO, freedom to operate. Freedom to operate is a ongoing continuous study of the patents emerging in an area related to a certain area of endeavor, whether it's a product, whether it's a line of products, whether it's a set of services. So to do an FTO properly, a simple search does not generally free you up. You generally will do a freedom to operate search, which will be an analysis and review of patents in a space related to the idea that you want to go forward with. It means flagging ongoing applications for further review as the issue. It also means ongoing commitment to review the other competitors in the marketplace and their reactions to your launch of product as well. Why does it matter? Risk.
And Mark, just to track back real quick to your claim versus disclosure analysis. I found this particularly important when you're looking at issued patents and pending applications. Issued patents almost end up being a lot easier because you can look at the, what do the claims cover. But with a pending application, because you don't know if they're going to file continuations, this is when you're looking at a competitor or a third party. You don't know if there's going to be continuations, where the claims are might end up. You end up having to dig into that whole disclosure to see where things might possibly be, and then monitor it. And it's an important one that a lot of times gets overlooked when folks are looking at, simply the claims of pending applications.
Yeah, and anybody who's doing the freedom to operate, if you say you've done freedom to operate and it's all it is a snapshot, there's a lot of attack basis there. So mitigation of risk, identification of opportunity, depending on what side of the argument you're on, it's really, really important. What do we look for? We answer questions in all these analytics based upon the question that's asked, because it is a highly customized and highly customizable outcome. We do it with, we baseline with the dashboard, but we always expand to other mapping and analysis tools, simply because there is a lot more, there's a lot more at stake here in this type of analytics. So once we get to this level of analytics, I don't know of a single commercial tool that does it perfectly or does it even well. So anyway, when do we do it? Before launch, around assertion events, but when we do design around events or M&A events, so forth and so on. So with that, that's the short course, and all the different things we're going to talk about, all the interesting stuff we're going to dive deeper into. But to give you a little taste test of everything that we're coming on forward with, we're very hopeful that you will be in play with us here. And I will turn it back over to Tom.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. That's quite a good description of all the areas that we're going to be covering. There's going to be a lot of interesting material here. So with that, again, Mark, thanks for going over all that. Thanks for the discussion. And we look forward to seeing everybody that's on in the upcoming courses.